Welcome back! My name is Baller Scuba. This is Video Games Over Time. We are still in 1986. Today, we're going to talk about some honorable mentions of 1986. In 1986, Rush'n Attack was ported to computers. Known as Green Beret in many of the computer versions, especially the ones ported by Ocean Software, these home versions of the 1985 arcade game were only relatively popular, but for the most part received positive reviews. In 1986, Palace Software released Cauldron 2: The Pumpkin Strikes Back to British computers. Designed by Steve Brown and programmed by Richard Leinfelder and Steve Schembri, with music from Richard Joseph, Cauldron 2 is a platform game and sequel to Cauldron. In the game, the player plays as a pumpkin, who must collect 6 magical items to defeat the witch from the first game. The game was reviewed well by critics at the time. On January 4th, 1986, Konami ported TwinBee to the Famicom. Konami would later port the game to MSX computers on May 25th, 1986. These versions of the 1985 arcade game would be relatively popular. In 1986, Commodore released Mindwalker to the Amiga 1000. Designed by Bill Williams of Synapse Software, Mindwalker is a platform game. The player is immersed inside a human brain and must cure a psychosis by making it through the enemies to complete the 6 levels of the game. The game was reviewed well at the time, but was seen as a very difficult game. In January 1986, Super Mario Bros. Was ported to arcades. Part of the Versus system, Versus Super Mario Bros. Was first released to European arcades in January, followed by an American release in February 1986. This version of the game would be much more difficult. The game would have narrower platforms, more dangerous enemies, and fewer power-ups. Versus Super Mario Bros. Sold 20,000 units within a few months, becoming the best-selling Nintendo Versus system release. In 1986, Hudson Soft released Super Mario Bros. Special to Japanese computers. Loosely based on Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. Special had to be redesigned to account for the technical limitations of the computers. As a result, the game does not have any scrolling, so the level designs, as well as some of the items and enemies, had to be changed for this version of the game. In 1986, Strategic Simulations released Gettysburg: The Turning Point to American computers. Designed by Chuck Krogel and David Landry, Gettysburg: The Turning Point is a strategy game. Based on the 1863 battle from the Civil War, the players will be able to play the battle as either the Union or Confederate forces. Despite some historical inaccuracies for the battle itself, Gettysburg: The Turning Point was seen by critics as one of the best war games of the time. In 1986, Tetris was ported to the IBM PC. Ported by Vadim Jerzimov, who Tetris's creator Alexei Pajitnov had worked with on previous games, this IBM PC version of Tetris was technically superior to the original version in many ways. However, this version of the game was originally only available in the USSR. Pajitnov wanted to get the game released internationally, but the laws inside the Soviet Union made this difficult. In 1986, Pajitnov transferred the rights to Tetris to the Soviet Academy of Sciences, where he was working, and asked his supervisor, Viktor Buryabrin, to help get the game published. Buryabrin sent a copy of the game to Novotrade, a Hungarian game publisher. Novotrade would circulate copies of the game throughout Hungary and even to neighboring countries like Poland. Robert Stein, a software salesman for Andromeda Software, a British company, saw Tetris when he was visiting Hungary in June 1986 and started trying to get the rights to the game. He reached out first to the Academy, but did not get the response he wanted, so he contacted Pajitnov and Buryabrin directly. Pajitnov and Buryabrin expressed interest in forming an agreement with Stein, but due to a misunderstanding, Stein believed this communication gave him the rights to Tetris. Stein would then start looking for a company to publish the game. That would take longer than 1986, so we will have to return to the story of Tetris in 1987. In 1986, Electronic Arts released PHM Pegasus to American computers. Designed by Noah Falstein with art by Ken Macklin and music by Christopher Grigg, the game was developed by Lucasfilm Games. PHM Pegasus is a vehicle simulation game. The player controls 3 different types of vehicles and must complete different kinds of missions, typically a seek and destroy mission or an escort mission. The game would prove to be moderately successful, selling over 100,000 copies. In 1986, Nihon Falcom released Xanadu Scenario 2 to Japanese computers. Xanadu Scenario 2 is an expansion pack to the original Xanadu. The expansion requires the player to still have the original Xanadu game to create characters and import into the expansion. This expansion pack includes a new soundtrack, a complex shopping and trading system, and new encounters and maps. This expansion would not be nearly as successful as Xanadu. On January 16, 1986, Apple released the Macintosh Plus computer. The third in the Macintosh line of computers, the Macintosh Plus was an upgrade to the Macintosh 512K computer, also known as the Fat Mac. The Macintosh Plus came with 1 megabyte of RAM with the ability to upgrade to 4 megabytes of RAM, as well as a double-sided disk drive. It sold for $25.99, over $7,400 in 2024. This version of the Macintosh would prove to be popular. Early in 1986, Atari released the Atari 1040 ST, the second computer in the Atari ST line. The 1040 ST was an upgrade to the 520 ST, featuring 1 megabyte of RAM. It would also have a double-sided floppy disk drive and power supply integrated into the base unit. The 1040 ST sold for just $999, over $2,850 in 2024. In 1986, Piranha Software released the Trapdoor to British computers. Developed by Don Priestley, the Trapdoor is an adventure game based on the British children's television show of the same name. The player plays as Burke, who must complete tasks given by the thing upstairs by using the objects around Burke's chambers. The game was reviewed well by critics at the time. On February 21, 1986, Konami released The Goonies for the Famicom. Featuring music from Satoe Terashima, The Goonies is a platform game based on the 1985 film. In the game, the player will go through 25 levels searching for the Goonies, using bombs to blow up doors where they might be hiding. In 1986, Strategic Simulations released Wizard's Crown to American computers. Designed by Paul Murray and Keith Broers, Wizard's Crown is a role-playing game. The player's goal is to create a party, then rescue the magical crown from Tarman, the evil wizard. The game was known for its depth, especially in the game's combat, which could take 40 minutes per battle. The game sold over 47,000 units and received relatively positive reviews at the time. In 1986, the software Toolworks released Chessmaster 2000 to computers. Chessmaster 2000 is a chess game. The game was reviewed very well by critics at the time for a chess game. It was also popular, selling 140,000 copies. On February 28, 1986, Hewson Consultants released Uridium to British computers. Designed by Andrew Braybrook of Graftgold, Uridium is a scrolling shooter. The player controls a space fighter, who must destroy the enemy fighters to get to the super dreadnoughts, which also must be destroyed. Critics at the time were very positive about the game. In 1986, Imagic went into liquidation. Responsible for Demon Attack for the Atari 2600 and the only third-party developer for the Magnavox Odyssey 2, Imagic struggled to recover from the video game crash of 1983. Despite a pivot to computer games in 1984, Imagic never again reached the success that Demon Attack gave them. The rights to Imagic's games would go to Activision. In 1986, Firebird Software published Rebel Star to British computers. Designed by Julian Gollop, Rebel Star is a strategy game. The player plays as the Rebel Star Raiders, who seek to destroy Isaac, a computer that broke the Raiders' secret codes. The game was reviewed very well by critics at the time, and is sometimes seen as one of the best war games on British computers. On March 1st, 1986, Namco released The Return of Ishtar to Japanese arcades. Designed by Masanobu Endo, with art by Yuichiro Shinozaki and music by Junko Ozawa, The Return of Ishtar is an action role-playing game and a sequel to The Tower of Druaga. 2 players must play the game, with the first player playing the Priestess Ki and the second player controlling Prince Gilgamesh. Taking place after the Tower of Druaga, the players must escape from the tower by defeating the enemies and finding their way to the next floor down. Gilgamesh will automatically draw his sword when enemies are close, allowing Gilgamesh to bump into the enemies to defeat them. The game was not popular and was reviewed poorly when it was released. In 1986, Sierra Online released The Black Cauldron to American computers. The game was produced by Joe Hale, designed by Al Lowe, and programmed by Scott Murphy with art from Mark Crow. Based on the 1985 film, The Black Cauldron is an adventure game. The player plays as Terran, who must stop the evil Horned King from getting Hen Wen, the magical pig of the wizard Dalbin. The game would feature multiple endings depending on how the player played the game and what choices they made. In 1986, Chris Crawford released Balance of Power, a book that details the internals of the 1985 video game of the same name. In the book, Crawford discusses the creation of the game, how the game's calculations work, and the background of the politics present in the game. On March 13, 1986, Microsoft went public. Selling shares of their company for the first time on a public exchange, the IPO for Microsoft would be very successful. The rise in the stock prices would make the employees and founders of the company very rich, very quickly. In 1986, TSR released Dungeons & Dragons Immortals Rules. Written by Frank Mentzer, Immortals Rules is an expansion to the basic set of rules. It is designed to deal with player characters who have transcended levels. It allows the players to exchange experience points for special abilities. The book also describes the history of Immortals within Dungeons & Dragons, explaining the multiverse and several planes of existence, and gives sample plots of adventures for immortal adventurers. In March 1986, Capcom released Trojan to North American arcades. Known in Japan as Tatakai no Banka, or Requiem for Battle, Trojan was designed by Takashi Nishiyama. Trojan is a beat-em-up game. The player plays as Hero Trojan, who must infiltrate the lands of the evil army and must exorcise the demons from their mortal bodies with his sword and shield. In 1986, Broderbund released Where in the USA is Carmen Sandiego to American computers. Where in the USA is Carmen Sandiego is an educational game and successor to Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. The game plays very similarly to the original game, but is limited to the United States. The game would come with a special copy of Fodor's USA Encyclopedia to help the player. Where in the USA is Carmen Sandiego would prove not to be as successful as the original game, but critics at the time gave the game relatively positive reviews. In March 1986, Namco released Hopping Mappy to Japanese arcades. Developed by Game Studio, Hopping Mappy is an action game and sequel to 1983's Mappy. The player plays as Mappy, who now bounces on a pogo stick. The player must bounce around the cats to collect 8 treasures in time to complete each level. In 1986, Atari Games released Super Sprint to arcades. Super Sprint was designed by Robert Weatherby and Kelly Turner, with art from Will Noble, Chris Moser, and Sam Comstock, and music by Hal Cannon. It is a racing game. Up to 3 players can play at the same time on a racetrack that is fully visible on the screen. There are 8 circuits in the game in total for the players to play. It was popular at the time, becoming one of the best-selling cabinets in Japan in 1986 and 1987. Critics were also positive about the game. On March 18, 1986, TNE Soft ported Hydlide to the Famicom. Published by Toshiba EMI, this version of the game would make some changes to the gameplay, including the addition of magic to the game. This version of the game would be popular in Japan, where it sold 1 million units. In 1986, Microprose released Gunship to computers. Gunship was designed by Arnold Hendrick and Andy Hollis, and programmed by Sid Meier and Greg Tavares, with art by Kimberly Disney, Michael O'Hare, and Michelle Mahan, and music by Ken Lagace. Gunship is a combat flight simulator. The player controls a gunship on missions in 5 different regions around the world, typically involving attacking or destroying key enemy assets. Gunship would be popular, selling over 500,000 units by 1989. Critics at the time were positive about the game, seeing it as the best helicopter game on the market. In 1986, DC ceased publication of the Atari Force comics. Started in 1982, Atari Force was a series of comics that featured Atari video games. In particular, those games were Berserk, Defender, Galaxian, Phoenix, and Star Raiders. Although the series was popular, 1986 would see the final issue of Atari Force, a special issue featuring several creators who had worked previously on the series. In 1986, CRL Group released Academy to British computers. Designed by Pete Cook, Academy is a sequel to Tau Ceti. The player plays a skimmer who must complete 20 missions on several different planets in order to graduate from the GalCorp Academy for Advanced Skimmer Pilots, or GASP. New to the game is the ability for the player to create and design their own skimmer. The game was reviewed well by critics at the time. In 1986, Rainbird released Star Glider to computers. Designed by Jez San and Rick Klukas of Argonaut Software, Star Glider is a space flight simulator. The player's goal is to rid the planet Novenia from the mechanical Egron invaders. The game came packed with a small novella by James Follett that would describe the backstory to the game. The game was reviewed well by critics at the time. That will do it for the honorable mentions of 1986 for now. My name is Baller Scuba. This has been Video Games Over Time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video when we try not to be tortured.